Do you know those overstimulating days when all you want is to close the door and be alone? And yet, we say yes, answer one more message, and feel guilty about an empty weekend. We still treat needing quiet like a weakness. Welsh painter Gwen John turned that exact weakness into her greatest strength. She works out of bohemian Paris right at the height of its noise and builds her whole life around solitude. So why does a woman walk away from the most exciting city in the world and choose stillness instead? How does she turn her introversion into something like a superpower? And what does her story tell us about our own longing for quiet? One of her most famous paintings shows what Gwen John's solitude looks like. It is called A Corner of the Artist's Room in Paris. In it, she paints her own quiet, and she paints it like something very precious. But here's the thing. This story doesn't begin in a quiet room. It begins with an adventure. As a young woman, Gwen John leaves Wales and studies at the Slade in London, one of the very few progressive art schools that admitted women at the time. Until one summer, she and her friend Dorelia decide to set out on a long walk through France toward Italy. Two young women, hardly any luggage but a full load of painting equipment. They sleep in fields and they pay their way by drawing portraits of strangers. They never make it to Italy, by the way, but they get as far as Toulouse, and there Gwen paints The Student, a quiet picture right in the middle of a big adventure. And looking back, this painting almost feels like a first glimpse of everything that is to come. When spring comes, Italy is forgotten, and instead of returning to London, Gwen chooses Paris. And Paris, in those years, is the place to be if you are an artist. The loudest, busiest spot in the art world. Everyone is here, everything is happening here. And Gwen steps right into the middle of it. She earns her living as an artist's model, and in one of the studios, she meets Auguste Rodin, the most famous sculptor alive at that time. She becomes his model, then she becomes his lover. For years, Rodin becomes the center of her emotional life. She writes him letter after letter. More than 1,000 of them still exist today. But even at the height of this love, Gwen is never just Rodin's muse. She lives in the most exciting art scene in the world, with its parties, its crowded cafes, its endless conversations about art. But look at what she paints during all those years, right in the middle of all that noise. Quiet rooms, quiet women, moments in which the world holds still. It's almost as if her art already knows something she hasn't put into words yet. It feeds on the quiet. At the height of her Paris years, something in Gwen begins to shift. Imagine her coming home after days full of other people, climbing the stairs to her small attic room in the Rue du Cherche-Midi. And in that room, with the door closed, the day falls away from her. Here, she can hear herself again. Here, she can paint. The quiet gives her back what the city takes. And we know all that because she paints it. So let's take a closer look together at A Corner of the Artist's Room in Paris. The wicker chair, the light falling in across the walls, the coat she has taken off just lying over the chair. At first sight, nothing is happening here. But the longer you look, the less empty this room feels. Someone lives here who has stopped performing for the day. And maybe that's exactly what this painting is. A portrait. A portrait of the person who just stepped out of the frame and of the stillness she comes home to. Gwen puts her own stillness on canvas here, and she treats it like the most valuable thing she owns. A few years later, she takes the next step and moves to Meudon, a small town in the woods just outside Paris. And you really have to understand what that means for a woman of her time. Gwen is unmarried, she lives alone, and she pays for all of it with her own work. That is simply not how a woman's life is supposed to look back then. But Gwen chooses it anyway, and she protects it. In one of her notebooks, she writes down rules for herself, under a title I absolutely love: Rules to Keep the World Away. Do not listen to people more than is necessary. Do not look at people, and so on. Now that might sound harsh at first, but these rules guard the one condition her art so desperately needs. Because it is in the stillness that her art transforms. The dark, glowing layers of her early years give way to something entirely her own. Pale, chalky colors set down in small touches. Small canvases, women reading, women sitting by a window and with their hands folded in their lap. A nun from her own church in Meudon. She paints the same sitter again and again in versions so similar that only the light seems to change. Nothing dramatic happens in these paintings, but that is exactly why you can't look away. They look the way deep stillness feels, because that is what the quiet gives her and what the noise never could. Attention and presence. And let's clear one thing up here, because her story is so often told this way. Gwen John is not some lonely cat lady hiding from life. She writes letters, she reads, she knows exactly what's happening in the world around her. She has simply decided how much of the world she lets in. Now there's one more person in this story, Gwen's brother, Augustus John. Augustus is everything Gwen is not. Flamboyant, loud, magnetic, the star of the London art world. For most of their lives, everyone agrees on how the story goes. Augustus is the genius of the family, Gwen is his quiet sister. But Augustus himself, he sees it differently. In 50 years' time, he famously says, "I shall be remembered only as the brother of Gwen." And he is right. Today, Gwen John is celebrated as one of the major painters of her generation. Her quiet rooms and her quiet women keep touching people, while the loud portraits of her brother slowly fade from view. Just think about that for a moment. The quiet one has outlasted the loud one, and she did it without ever raising her voice. Today, we would probably call Gwen John an introvert. And I think her story holds two things we keep forgetting. The first one is, Gwen's quiet was never a lack of life. It was a different source of energy, the place where she recharged. And the second thing is, the stillness itself can do things. It deepens, it restores. It lets you see what stays invisible in the noise. How light falls on the wall in the late afternoon. What a face does when nobody's watching anymore. How much presence there is in an empty chair. Most of us carry more noise through one single day than Gwen John let into a year. And many of us know the pull she knew. To step back, to close the door, to let things grow still around us. So the next time you feel that pull, maybe you don't have to mistrust it. Stillness, Gwen John shows us, is not a retreat from life. It can be a way back into it.